Ladies and gentlemen, how solemn and beautiful is the thought that the earliest pioneer of civilization is never the railroad, never the newspaper, never the missionary, but whiskey. However, truth is the most valuable thing we have this evening, so let us economize it. I'd like to thank you for joining us for this evening's services. I almost missed them myself. I came by railroad. It's one of those trains that gets tired every 7 minutes and has to stop and rest for 3/4 of an hour. One of the passengers advised the conductor that we should take the cow catcher off the front and put it on the rear. Because at the rate we were going, we weren't going to catch any cows. But there was nothing to keep them from climbing aboard the back. That was one piece. We got up a pretty good head of steam for about 20 minutes. And I thought we were going into a tunnel. It was a short tunnel, but I must have fallen asleep or something because I don't remember the rest of the trip. I do know that I ended up here, and I'm happy to be with you. However, if I have to go to heaven by railroad, I believe I will go the other way. There was a dog that came aboard the train about midway through the morning and barked steadily at nothing till he died. Never seen one of its kind before. It was a rather long, low dog with very short legs, turned rather like parentheses the wrong way. It was made on the plan of a bench, really. But he seemed satisfied. I didn't ask what kind of a dog it was, nor how he came to be deformed. The owner seemed very fond of it. He said that it had won prizes in dog shows, and that when he took it out, people would stop and look at it. Well, this did not seem strange to me. I could have told him, if you take a long, low dog out like that and for a waddle now and again and don't charge admission, people will stop and look. If I was built like that, I could win prizes myself. Well, anyway, I don't think it was a dog at all. Might have been on the verge of being a dog, but it wasn't a dog. Well, I hope you won't mind if I smoke. I can't see any harm in it, unless there are children present. I didn't start smoking myself till I was nearly 9 years old. Even then, I was not constant. I was always ready to reform. If only I could have seen any profit in it. The only profit I could ever see in it was in the heavenly pleasure of giving up the reform and going back to smoking again. Well, I came into this world asking for a light. I think I shall go out of it blowing smoke rings. But temperate temperance is best, don't you think? Intemperate temperance is apt to be troublesome. When I was just a young man studying for the gallows, I headed west on the overland stage to San Francisco. I arrived with a very bad cold. The lady at the hotel advised that I should drink a quart of whiskey every 24 hours. And another friend advised the very same thing. That made half a gallon. I'd been drunk before, but that was a masterpiece. I went to bed early that night. I had a horrible nightmare. I dreamt I was baptized. Turned out it was just a WC call along about 2 o'clock in the morning. I sprung up in my nightshirt and ran out into the hall without a candle. And then I remembered there was no WC on our floor. Well, it was pitch dark, so I groped along upstairs till I found the WC there, and then headed on home. I went upstairs and I started to paw along the wall till I got to the door that I thought was my room, and then I remembered I should have gone upstairs when I oh, wait a minute, I wasn't too sure about that either. My mind lost confidence and began to wander. I realized I didn't know what floor I was on. I was lost. As soon as my mind knew that, the rest of it went. But a man can't stand still in the middle of a dark hallway at 2 o'clock in the morning in just his nightshirt, looking like an envelope without an address on it. Can't do that and feel content. You got to go somewhere. So I marched up and down a couple of flights, torch lighting the way with profanity. You see, I couldn't go downstairs to the ground floor and start fresh because there was a ball going on down there. Ballroom full of young ladies is a dangerous place, clothed as I was. Not in my right mind. And pretty soon I heard those girls getting ready to come up to bed. Well, I didn't know if I was on a WC floor or not. So I scampered through the first open door I could find and prayed it was the right one. It was. I stood there in that humble shelter, happy as a martyr when the fire won't burn. I thought how happy I should be to live there always, away from life's trials and tribulations. Several of the young ladies applied for admission, but I was not receiving. Thursdays being my day. Well, I waited till the house was dead and dark, and I went on downstairs, figured out which way was up, and then headed on home. And then my temper got afire, and I let her go. And in the middle of that great eruption, I heard an admiring female voice in the dark say, "When you're through with your evening prayers, I'd like to know what you're doing in my room." Well, I went out there to San Francisco looking for a job. I was very particular about the kind of job I would get. I didn't want to work. So I became a newspaper reporter. I hated to do it, but I couldn't find honest employment. I often had to serve time that way. When I was putting together my first book, I was in Washington. Washington, you know, the national stud farm for every jackass in the United States. And I did a stretch as a newspaper correspondent, and every day I went over to Congress, that grand old benevolent national asylum for the helpless, and reported on the inmates there. It was very entertaining. I'd never seen a body of men with tongues so handy and information so uncertain. They'd talk for a week, never get rid of an idea. One of those men had been present when the deity was on the point of saying, "Let there be light." We never would have had it. Well, anyway, back there in San Francisco, I went up into the mountains that winter to hunt for gold. I didn't find any gold, but I did hear Jim Blaine tell the remarkable story of his grandfather's old ram. Now, Jim Blaine had the kind of memory that was so good that it defeated his every purpose to march a straight course. Whenever he'd come across the name of someone or something that had nothing to do with his tale, he'd stop and tell all about it. With the result, as he plodded along, he got further and further away from the adventure of his grandfather with the ram. I found him on an empty powder keg, smoking. "Well, my grandfather got that old ram from a feller in Siskiyou County, don't you know, and brought him home and put him in the meadow. And the next morning he went down to the meadow to have a look at him, and accidentally dropped a 10-cent piece in the grass, and was a bent over a-fumbling in the grass to get it. Now the old ram was up the slope taking notice. My grandfather wasn't taking notice because he had his back to the ram, don't you see? Now Smith of Calaveras was a-standing there." No, wait. No, he was a Baptist. No, it was Smith of Tulare County. I know who it was. Of course it was. I remember perfectly clear. Well, so Smith of Tulare was a-standing there. Smith of Tulare was a-standing there. Smith of Tulare. Smith of Calaveras was a Baptist. And the ram was up the slope. Well, anyway, my grandfather was right here, bent over, fumbling in the grass. And when the old ram seen him in that attitude, he took it for an invitation. And down he come that slope doing 30 miles an hour, his eye full of business. Well, my grandfather, don't you know, bent over, oh, sure, it weren't Smith of Tulare after all. No. It was Smith of Sacramento. Of course it was. The Smith of Tulare is just a nobody. But the Smiths of Sacramento, there's no southern blood in these United States better than them Smiths of Sacramento. You won't find any blood south of the line better than them Sacramento Smiths. One of them married a Whitaker. What do you say to that? Mariah Whitaker, there was a girl for you. Sweet and lovely, kind, and generous. If she had a thing and you wanted it, you could have it. Have it and welcome. She had a glass eye. She used to lend to Flora Ann Baxter, who hadn't any, to receive company with. Now, Flora Ann was kind of large and it didn't fit. It was a number 7. She was excavated for a 14. Well, I wouldn't lay still, don't you know. When she'd wink, it would roll over. It was a lovely eye. It was painted a lovely pale blue on the one side, gilded on the back side. Set her off admirable. Didn't match the other eye, which is one of them browny, yellery eyes. Kind of calm and tranquil the way them eyes are. But it's all right. They work together all right. And plenty picturesque. When Flora Ann would come get excited, that old handmade eye would give a whirl and go on a whirling. First blue and then yellow and then blue. The other one stands still. Grown folks didn't mind it, but it almost always made the children cry. Flora Ann Baxter, she married a Hagedorn. Old Eastern Shore, Maryland blood. Reckon you've heard of the Hagedorns. Ain't no better family in these United States than them Hagedorns. Sally. Ooh. Sally Hagedorn. She married a missionary. He went off around the world, carried the good news to the cannibals. Way off around the world in the middle of an island in the ocean summers. And they ate her. At him too. But they were sorry about it. They were dreadful sorry about it. They said as much. When the family sent down there to fetch away their things, they said so. They said they were sorry. Said it shouldn't happen again. Said it were an accident. Accident. There's foolishness for you. There's nothing that happens in this world that happens by accident. There ain't nothing there's nothing to put into place. It ain't made just so by a higher and wiser power, and always for a noble purpose. Well, you just look at my Uncle Lem. What do you say to that? You just look at my Uncle Lem, try and talk to me about accidents. You know, my Uncle Lem and his dog were downtown one day. And Lem was leaning up against a scaffolding, sick or drunk or something. And there was this Irishman up about the 3rd story with a hoard of bricks. And his foot slipped, and down he come, bricks and all, and struck this passing stranger fair and square and knocked the everlasting aspirations out of him. And all the people said it were an accident, but it weren't no accident. It was a special providence, and it had a mysterious and noble purpose behind it. The idea was to save the Irishman. Well, if that stranger hadn't been there, the Irishman would have been killed. People said special providence, so the dog was there. Why didn't the Irishman land on the dog? Why weren't the dog appointed? For a real simple reason. The dog wouldn't have seen him coming. You can't count on no dog to carry out a special providence. You couldn't hit, listen here, you couldn't hit a dog with an Irishman. What was that dog's name? Jasper. Mighty fine dog he was, too. Weren't no common dog. Weren't no mongrel. He was a composite. My Uncle Lem got him from the Wheelers. I reckon you've heard of the Wheelers. Ain't no better family in these United States than them Wheelers. Old man Wheeler. Yeah. Worked in a carpet factory. And one day he was in the carpet factory dreaming and contemplating or something. And the machinery made a snatch at him. Well, first thing you know, old Wheeler's meandering all over the factory. Faster and faster. You couldn't even see him. You just heard him whiz as he went by. Yeah. Old Wheeler got wove up into 39 yards of the best 3-ply carpeting. His widow was uncommonly sorry for him. She tried to do the best she could under the circumstances. She took the whole piece, 39 yards, and she wanted to give him a proper and honorable burial, but she couldn't bear to roll him up. He wanted to buy a tunnel for him, but there were no tunnels for sale. So she, oh my land, she boxed him into a lovely box, and she put him on a pedestal. Whoa, on a hill. And she painted on him, in loving memory, of 39 yards, the best 3-ply carpeting containing the mortal remains of Millington G. Wheeler. Go forth and do likewise. All right, then Jim Blaine would always fall asleep, so we never did find out what happened to his grandfather's old ram. Poor old Wheeler. I had an uncle who got himself killed in nearly the same way once. It was on the 4th of July, and this uncle of mine, full of patriotism, ran out into the street to hurrah, and a rocket went right down his throat. I had another uncle, too, sort of a spare uncle. Went to see a certain dentist, a certain Dr. Tushmaker, to have his tooth pulled. And the dentist pulled, but the tooth wouldn't come, but every time he did, my uncle's right leg come up. The dentist said, "What are you doing that for?" And my uncle said, "I can't help it." The dentist said, "Well, you come back at the end of the week. I'll take care of you." And in the ensuing days, this dentist invented an instrument with the combined properties of the screw, the lever, the wedge, the hammer, and the inclined plane. And when my uncle came and sat in the chair, one turn of the crank and out came the tooth. Its roots were wrapped around his right big toe, and his entire skeleton was extracted with the tooth. Had to send him home in a pillowcase. Well, I thought I would insert some variety into this evening's services. I recently wrote Mr. Andrew Carnegie about getting a hymn book. Dear Mr. Carnegie, I see by the papers that you are very prosperous, and I want to get a hymn book. It costs $2. I will bless you, God will bless you, and it'll do a great deal of good. Truly yours, Mark Twain. P.S. Don't send me the hymn book, send me the $2. Well, I wanted to select it myself. I'm not lying to you. I don't tell lies. I differ from George Washington. I have a higher and grander standard of principle. George could not tell a lie. I can, but I won't. Oh, I used to tell lies, but I've given it up. The field is overrun with amateurs. When I stop and think and contemplate the lumbering, slovenly lying of the present day, it grieves my heart so to see such a noble art so prostituted. In my day, a liar was a liar. I do not mean to suggest that the custom of lying has suffered any decay. It couldn't. The lie is eternal. It is man's truest and best friend and shall not perish from the earth as long as Congress is in session. No, when I talk about the decay in the art of lying, I'm talking about the silent lie. It requires no art, only that one stay still and conceal the truth. Well, for example, it would not be possible for a humane and intelligent person to come up with a rational excuse for slavery. Yet, in those early days of the emancipation agitation in the North, those agitators received very little help from anyone. Oh, plead and pray and cry as they might. They could not shatter the universal stillness that echoed from pulpit to press to the very bottom of society. The clammy stillness made possible by the lie of silent assertion. The silent assertion that there wasn't anything really going on that a humane and intelligent person would find interesting. Well, when an entire nation of people conspire to propagate gigantic mute lies like that one in the interest of tyranny and sham, why should we be so bothered by the one individual liar? Why make them undesirable? Why not tell the truth and lie all the livelong day? Why, when an entire country quietly underscores a lie like that, why would we be so bothered by one little individual itsy-bitsy lie told in our own self-interest, just for the refreshment of it, and to get the rancid taste out of our mouths. No, there is no art to the silent lie. It is timid and shabby. And I've been addressing my remarks so far this evening to the young people in the audience. The old ones are too far gone. And I do hope that the young people will understand me and take heed. I hope it, but I doubt it. My own father, when I was 14, he was so stupid I could scarcely stand to have the old man around. By the time I was 21, I was simply astounded at how much he had learned in the last 7 years. Well, now I want to bring you a selection from Huckleberry Finn. This is a book about a boy. Several of you in the audience have been boys, and the rest of you had a good deal to do with boys. This is a book about a boy who lived many, many years ago in the Mississippi River Valley. He was ignorant, unwashed, insufficiently fed, but he had a good as heart as any boy ever had. And he was the only truly independent spirit, boy or man, in his community. And for that reason, I suppose, he was continually happy. Now in this book, Huckleberry tells his own story all by himself. You don't know me without, you read a book named The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That book was made by Mr. Mark Twain. And he told the truth, mainly. Some things he stretched, but mainly he told the truth. That's all right. I never knew nobody didn't tell a lie now and again, except for maybe my Aunt Polly and the widow Douglas. The widow, she took me for her own son, and she allowed us how she was going to civilize me. She cried over me. She called me a poor lost lamb. She called me a lot of other names too, but I didn't mind. She didn't mean no harm by it. And then she dressed me up in all these new clothes, and I couldn't do nothing but sweat and get all cramped up. Pretty soon I wanted to smoke, but the widow, she wouldn't let me. She said it were a mean practice and it weren't clean, and I should try not to do it anymore. Ain't that just the way with some folks, though? They get down on the thing when they don't know nothing about it. She took snuff, too. I guess that's all right, because she'd done that herself. And then her sister, Miss Watson, an old biddy with goggles on, all this time saying to me, "Don't put your feet up there, Huckleberry. And sit up straight, Huckleberry. And don't sit there all crunched up. Can't you try and behave?" And she'd tell me all about the bad place. And I said, I wish I was there. She got mad then. But I didn't mean nothing by it. I didn't mean no harm. I was just looking for a change. I just wanted to go somewhere, and I wasn't particular. And then she allowed us how she was going to go and live so she could go to the good place. Well, I didn't see no advantage in going where she was going. So I made up my mind not to try out for it. I went to school about 4 or 5 months, and I learned to read and write and do the multiplication tables up to 4 times 5 equals 20. I don't guess I could have learned all that even if I'd lived forever. And then one night, I lit my candle and I went up to my room, and there sat Pap, his own self. Oh, he tore into me something awful for putting on airs and clothes and going to school. And then pretty soon he fetched me up and he took me over to the Illinois side of the river to a log cabin there, and I couldn't run off. Old Pap, he was so handy with that hickory. I could hardly stand it. I was all over welts. And then one night he'd been to drinking in town, and he come home and he say, the townspeople said there's going to be another trial, and they was going to take me away from him and give me to the widow for my guardian. And he got to cussing. He said, I'd like to see the widow trial. Old Pat, whenever his liquor got to working, he most always went for the government. This time he said, "What kind of a government is this? You just look at it and see. Gonna be taking a man's own son away from him? Well, man, after he worked so hard to raise that son up, get him ready. Get him ready to go out to work. Do something for him for a change. Give him a rest. And then that government's going to ghost him? Why, you can't call that a government. Well, you can't get no rights in a government like that. And that ain't the worst. You know what I heard? Across the river in Ohio is this free nigger. A mulatta. Most like a white man he is. He got a clean white shirt. Cleanest you ever saw. And a shiny hat. And a gold watch and a chain. And they say he's some sort of professor in a college and he can talk all sorts of languages and know everything about everything. Well, then they say when he get home, he's going to vote. Well, I God drawled out right then. I said, what kind of a country is this? We're going to let him vote. I go down to that polling place myself. I weren't too drunk to get there. And I tell him I'm never going to vote again. Well, I can't put up with it. The country can rot for all I care. You heard what I said. That's the very words I said. I'm never going to vote again. Well, old Pat, when he got excited like that, he didn't pay no attention where his limber legs was taking him. And he went head over heels over a tub of salt pork and barked both shins. Rest of his speech was some of the hardest kind of language. And then he got up and he fetched that old tub a rattling kick with his left foot, but it weren't good judgment. That's the boot of his, has a couple of his toes leaking out the front. I run off from Pap after that, and I hid out on Jackson's Island. That's where I met Miss Watson's Jim. He said he'd run off too. Well, but I promised I wouldn't tell on him. I knowed I'd done wrong. And the old folks would despise me and call me a low-down abolitionist. But I didn't care. I weren't going back there again anyway. And me and Jim, we found ourselves an empty piece of log raft, and we head on down the river. We run nights and laid up and hid days. We just let that old raft go wherever it wanted to go, wherever the current wanted to take it. It's lovely to live on a raft. We just lay on our backs and smoke our pipes and look way off into the sky. Not a cloud in it. The sky looks ever so deep when you lay on your back in the moonshine. I never knowed it before. Or how far a body can hear on the water such nights. I'd fall asleep, and Jim, when it was time for my watch, he wouldn't wake me. He let me sleep. He often done that. And then when I'd wake up in the morning, he'd be sitting there with his head hung low, moaning and carrying on. I didn't let on like I noticed, but I knew what it was. He's feeling low and homesick. He's missing his wife and children that were way up yonder. And you know, he'd never been away from home before. I reckon he missed his folks just as much as white folks do theirs. Don't seem natural, but I reckon it's so. And always he and I keep an eye down on the foot of the Illinois where the Ohio comes in. We're watching for Cairo. And Jim say what we would do is sail the raft, and then we'd get on a steamboat, and we'd go way up the Ohio towards the free states and away from trouble. And Jim said it made him altogether kind of trembling and fearful to be so close to being free. He said, well, the first thing he'd do is when he got to a free state, he'd get a job and go to work and save all his money, and he wouldn't spend a cent. And when he had enough money, he'd buy his... Well, he'd buy his wife, who was on a farm near Miss Watson. And then they'd both go to work and they'd buy their 2 children. And, well, I got it through my head that Jim was most free. Because then he said, if the master wouldn't sell him, they'd get an abolitionist and go steal him. About froze me to hear such talk. Well, Jim wouldn't have never stood there before. and say flat-footed how he's going to go steal his children. Children that was owned by a man I didn't even know. It never done me no harm. But see, it never come down to me before what this thing was I was doing. And, well, see, Jim was most free. And who was to blame for it? Me. Then my conscience got heated up and hotter, and I said, oh, lay off me, will you? I'll go show her first light and tell. And then pretty soon, one come along, and Jim got excited because he said, it's Cairo. And I said, no, Jim, no. It might not be. Better let me paddle ashore and go see, you know? And then he got the canoe ready for me, and he handed me the paddle. And I shove off about 50 yards, and then he said, there you go. There go the old true Huck. The only white gentleman ever to keep his promise to old Jim. Well, I just felt sick. There I was, all paddling off in a sweat to go tell on him, and then he says something like that. Just seemed to take the tuck right out of me. I weren't altogether sure whether I was happy I started this or whether I weren't. But then my conscience says, no, you got to do it. You can't get out of it. And then right along comes a skiff, right then, with 2 men on it, with guns. And they stop, and I stop, and one of them says, what's that yonder? A piece of raft. You belong on it? Yes, sir. Got any men on it? Just one, sir. Well, there's 5 niggers that run off last night up around the Agra Bend. Your man black or white? Oh, he's white. And they went off. I know it done wrong again. I guess there ain't no use in me trying to learn to do right. See, if I'd have gone to Sunday school and learned to behave, I'd have known what to do. But a body that don't just started right when he's little, he just ain't got no show. And then I says to myself, hold on. If you'd have done right and you'd have turned Jim in, would you feel any better than you do right now? Well, no, says I'd feel bad. I'd feel the same as I do now. Well, then says I, what's the use of you learning to try to do right? When it's troublesome to do right, and ain't no trouble to do wrong. And the wages are just the same. Well, I couldn't answer that. I just blocked it out of my head. I just pushed the whole thing out of my head. And I said I would take up wickedness again, which is in my line, being brought up to it. And for starters, I'd go to work and I'd steal Jim out of slavery. And if that meant I was going to hell, well, then I just go to hell. Well, thank you, Huck. But I think now I'll declare a rest period. It's a terrible death to be talked to death. I'd like to pause now and again and allow you inmates to escape if you haven't already. So I'm going to go back and have a smoke, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes. No, I said cigar. Cigar. Oh. Well, you came back. It's a comical invention, the human race, any way you look at it. It does seem a shame, though, at times, that Noah and his party did not miss the boat. You may have noticed that man's a bit of a curiosity. Originally, he started off a little lower than the angels, and he's been getting a little lower ever since. To place him properly in the present time, he stands somewhere between the angels and the French. Oh, marvelous he. Well, for example, he's invented a heaven and emptied into it all of the peoples of the earth, from all nations, all in a common jumble, and all in an equality absolute. They have to be brothers. They have to mix together and pray together and harp and hosanna together. Whites, Negroes, Jews, everybody. There are no distinctions. And yet down here on earth, every nation hates the other one and fights amongst themselves, and every one of them persecutes the Jew. And yet the pious person, he loves that heaven and can't wait to get into it. He really does. Isn't that marvelous? And when he's in a holy rapture, he thinks to himself, if only I could get up there, I would take that entire populace to my chest and hug and hug and hug. I wonder sometimes if God invented man because he was disappointed in the monkey. Well, training and association can produce strange miracles at times. When I was just a schoolboy, I had no aversion to slavery. I did not know there was anything wrong with it. Local paper said nothing against it. Local pulpit taught us that God approved of it. That it was a holy thing. And that the doubter only need look into the passages of the Bible to make his mind calm. Then the text was read aloud to make the matter certain. If there were passages in the Bible that disappointed or approved of slavery, they were not quoted by our pastors. Bless you. I wonder how they could lie so. The result of practice, no doubt, and the supreme confidence of a true believer with 4 aces. Well, anyway. When I was a very little boy, I saw a very brave man, a gentleman, deride and insult a lynching mob and drive it off. The truth is, no mob has any real sand in it when it's in the presence of a man known to be splendidly brave. But where are such men to be found? If physically brave men would do, well, that'd be easy. They could be had by the cargo. But morally brave men and women who can face up against church-going gangs of hooded murderers, they seem to be in short supply. Seem to be in a condition of profound poverty there. What we really need is some starters. Where are they to be found? What should we do, advertise? All right, then, let's advertise. In the meantime, there's another plan. Why not import American missionaries from China and set them loose in the lynching fields? Why, there are 1,511 American missionaries out there converting 2 Chinamen apiece per annum against an uphill birth rate of 33,000 pagans a day. If we can offer our missionaries a richer field here at home at much lighter expense and quite satisfactory in the matter of danger, why shouldn't they come home and give us a trial? Besides, those Chinese people are universally understood to be hard-working, industrious, honest. Why don't we give those poor things a rest, huh? And every convert runs the risk of catching our civilization. Ought to think twice before running a risk like that. Once civilized, China can never be uncivilized again. I've been thinking about that. Oh, kind missionary, oh, compassionate missionary, leave China. Come home and convert these Christians wearing the hoods. Oh, what a hell of a heaven it's going to be when all those hypocrites are gathered there. Man is really the most interesting jackass there is. It's his idea, you see, that the deity sits up nights to admire him. He's the creator's pet. And you may wonder why. Well, it's because of his intellect. Man is the reasoning animal. Such is the claim. I do think that is open to dispute. Well, I've been studying this reasoning animals for years now, and I find the results humiliating. For example, I got a dog and a cat, experimented with them, put them in a cage, taught them to be friends. Then I added a rabbit. In an hour, they were friends. And then I added a fox, a goose, a squirrel, some doves, a kangaroo, and finally a monkey. And they all got together and lived in peace. Well, then I called myself an Irish Catholic. And I put him in a cage. And when he seemed tame, I added a Presbyterian. And then a believer from Constantinople, a Methodist from the wilds of Arkansas, a Buddhist from China, and finally a Salvation Army colonel. And when I come back, there wasn't a specimen left alive. Seemed these reasoning animals had disagreed on a theological matter and had taken the issue to a higher court. Because you see, man is also the religious animal. He's the only one that's got the true religion. Several of them. He loves his brother as himself and slits his throat if his theology isn't straight. He's made a graveyard of the globe, trying to smooth his brother's path to heaven and happiness. The other animals have no religion, you know. Going to be left out when I wonder why. Does seem questionable taste. Man is the only patriot. He sets himself apart in his own country under his own flag and sneers at all the other one. Keeps uniformed assassins on hand at heavy expense to keep, he can grab slices of other people's countries and keep them from grabbing slices of his. All with the result that there isn't an acre of land left on the globe that's in the possession of its rightful owner. And in between campaigns, in the interval, he washes the blood from his hands and works for the brotherhood of man with his mouth. Man is the only animal that deals in the atrocity of war. He's the only one that for sordid wages goes forth in cold blood to exterminate his own kind. Here's a motto for this: our country, right or wrong. Any man who fails to shout it is a traitor. Only the other ones are patriots. Hey, who is the government anyway? Who is the country? In a republic, the government is simply a servant, a temporary one. Its function is to take orders, not originate them. Man should only defend his republic when it's threatened with danger, or his government when it's wrong. Otherwise, the nation has sold its honor for a phrase. And if that phrase needs help, he gets another one. Even though the war be wrong, we are in it. We must fight it out. We cannot retire without dishonor. Not even a burglar could have said that better. Man is the only animal that blushes, or needs to. Well, then you just have to remember that man was made at the end of the week's work. Now I'd like to take us in another direction if I could. I'd like to tell you a ghost story. And I want to be honest with the nervous ones in the audience. You may want to leave now if you haven't left already. This ghost story scares me half to death. No takers? All right, you strong hearts, here we go. When I was just a young boy, growing up in Hannibal on the river, we spent part of every year on my uncle's farm. And there was another uncle on that farm, too. A middle-aged slave called Uncle Daniel, whose sympathies were wide and warm. And every night, we children would gather on Uncle Daniel's hearth and listen to him tell us those immortal tales from Uncle Remus, Joel Harris, who gathered those stories together by and charmed the world with them. I can still remember the creepy joy that quivered through me as the time for the ghost story was near. We'd sit there on the hearth with our knees pulled up, hugging them, watching the flames shoot up from the chimney along, throwing slender shadows on the walls into every dark corner of the room, and listening as the wind howled around the edges of the house. You'd be scared half to death before it even began. And then he'd tell us the story of the golden arm. Once upon a time, there was a monstrous mean man, lived all by himself, all alone, way out on the prairie. Except when he had a wife. And by she died, and he tucked and toted her way out on the prairie, and he buried her. And she had this golden arm. Solid gold from the shoulder on down. Oh, he mean, that man. And he couldn't sleep that night because he wanted that golden arm so bad. And he tossed and he turned along about midnight. He couldn't take it no more. And he got up, he did. And he took his lantern and he pushed out into the snow. And he plowed and he plowed and he plowed and he found he dug her. And he got that golden arm for himself. And then he turned his head back into the wind and started to plow through the snow. And then he stopped. And he hears something in the wind. And he listened. And the wind say, "Ooh." And they hear a voice. You hear a voice way back by the grave. And it's all mixed up with the storm and the wind, so you can't hardly tell them apart. And the voice say, "Ooh, God, my golden arm." And then he commenced to shiver and he shake and said, "Oh, my land." And then the wind blew the lantern out, and the snow and the sleet most choke him. And he turned and he started to plow knee deep through the snow toward home, most dead. He's so scared. And then he heard that voice again one more time. And this time it's coming after him. And it's just right behind him saying, "Who's got my golden arm?" And when he gets to the back, he hear it again, coming in the back in the dark. And he's so scared he can barely breathe. And he run up to his room and he dive in his bed and he kiver up head and he lay there shaking and shivering and listening. And by, he heard that voice again, right outside the house. "Who's got my golden arm?" And then he hear, it's coming up the stairs. And then he hear the latch of the door. And then he know it's in the room. And then he knowed that it's by the bed. And then he knowed that it's leaning right down over him, and he can't scarcely breathe. He's so scared. And then he seemed to feel something cold right down next his head. And that voice in his ear said, "Oh, God, my good little." You got it. And that wicked old rascal sent us up to bed. I can still remember how dark that room was in the dark of the moon. We lay there summer nights, listening to the rage of the rain on the roof, and watching the white cracked splendor of the lightning, and listening to the majestic rolling and timbering of the thunder. We were all good Presbyterian boys when the weather was doubtful. Outside the front fence ran the country road, dusty in the summer and a good place for snakes. When there were house snakes or garters, we would carry them home and put them in Aunt Patsy's work basket for a surprise. She was prejudiced against snakes, and almost always when she took the basket into her lap and they began to crawl out, it disordered her mind. Yeah. Miss Hart, our summer school teacher, was a stern New England warrior with eyes that could move like pivot guns. She could roll one rearward and the other forward like a senator. I didn't think I should ever learn to like her, except maybe on a raft at sea with no other provisions in sight. Well, when I was a boy, just a little boy, inhabiting that small Missouri town, my comrades and I had one permanent ambition: to run away to the river and be steamboatmen. One by one, those boys did that, ran off onto the river, and by I joined them. And I said I would never come home again till I could come home as a steamboat pilot, bathed in glory. I love that profession, far better than any I've followed since. I took an immeasurable pride in it. For a steamboatman in those days was one of the truly only unfettered people to walk the earth. The pilot house was a sumptuous glass temple, offering a princely view of the great Mississippi, rolling its mile-wide tide down towards the Gulf in the summer sun. 4 o'clock watches morning, I watched the sun rise on the river. That was enchanting. First, the eloquence of silence, then the haunting feeling of loneliness and isolation, remoteness from the bustle and the worry of the world. The dawn crept in stealthily. Solid walls of black forest would soften to gray as entire stretches of the river opened up in front of you. All this water was glass. And a bird piped up. And as the light got a little stronger, you had revealed to you one of the fairest and loveliest pictures imaginable. The intense green of the crowded and massed foliage nearby, paling shade by shade in front of you. And this entire section of river was a mirror. It was just beautiful. And when the sun got well up, scattering a flavoring of pink here, and a gold powder yonder, and a purple haze, it would reveal to best effect, you would grant that you'd seen something worth remembering. Well, I'd hoped to follow the river the rest of my days, die at the wheel when my mission was done. But by and by the war came, and commerce on the river ceased, and my occupation was gone. Oh, I had to find other livelihood. I joined the Confederacy, served for 2 weeks. deserted, and the Confederacy fell. So I went west to San Francisco to hunt for gold. I was going to get rich. I was going to be a millionaire. Of course, I expected to find all the gold just laying around on the ground waiting for me to shovel it in. I struck a disappointment there. Like so many dreams of my youth, pipe dreams, it was all based on rumor. When I got out there, I found that I'd just been drunk on the smell of someone else's cork. That you had to have a long-handled shovel and dig for the gold. Well, I had no use for a long-handled shovel. Well, I had no objection if other people used one. I even sit and shout encouragement at them when I wasn't busy catching flies. No, I love to catch flies. Didn't require any talent. All you had to do was grab whatever fly I want, and God is the one I wanted. I weren't particular. Didn't matter. Now that California get-rich disease of my youth caught on like wildfire. And it's created a civilization which has destroyed the simple repose and poetry of life, its gentle dreams and soft visions, and replaced them with a moneyed fever, sordid ideals and vulgar ambitions, and the sleep which does not refresh. It's created 1,000 useless luxuries and turned them into necessities, satisfied nothing. It's dethroned God, put a shekel in its place. Ah, the dreams of our youth, how beautiful they are, and how perishable. Well, last year I celebrated my 70th escape from the gallows and the mortician. In 2017, I shall be 182 years old. I'm going to leave my skull at Cornell University so the scientists there can examine it and send me a report. People say I've become a pessimist in my old age, but I'm not. I am an optimist who has not yet arrived. Oh, I've had a good life. I've traveled. I've seen all the foreign countries I care to see, except for heaven and hell. I only have a passing interest in one of them. I would like to see my old ancestor, though, Satan. I have no special regard for Satan, but I think I can admit to not having any prejudice against him. May even be that I lean a little his way on account of his not having a fair show. Well, all the religions issue Bibles against him and say the most injurious things about him. We never hear his side. We only have the evidence for the prosecution. And yet we've rendered a verdict. Well, to my mind, this is irregular. It is un-English. It is un-American. It is French. Without that precedent, Dreyfus could have never been condemned. Satan must have some case. That goes without saying. May not be a good one, but then that could have been said about any of us. No, when I have the time, I intend to collect the facts and conduct his rehabilitation myself, if I can find an unpolitic publisher. We will not pay him reverence, for that would be indiscreet. But we can at least admire his talents. Any man who could for untold eons maintain the imposing position of spiritual head of 4/5 of the human race and political head of the whole of it must have some executive abilities. I should like to meet him. I'd rather meet him, shake him by the tail, than almost any statesman on the planet. And I probably will. I remember saying to our pastor, Charles Jim Marsh was his name, I said once, I hope to be cremated. He just looked at me and said, well, I shouldn't worry about that if I had your chances. All my life, I've heard a good deal about heaven and hell. as near as I can figure, if a man goes to heaven, he will spend all of his time trying to improve himself. He will study and study and study and progress and progress and progress. And if that's not hell, I don't know what is. Well, now it's time to go. My feet are tired, and you are tired. And I seem to know that I need to catch that same train that brought me. I don't know why, because I don't have a ticket. But I'm just as sure that I do have a seat on it. Wherever it's going, I need to not miss it. You know, in the last year since my 70th birthday, I've received hundreds of letters from people in all walks of life, men, women, and children. And there are in them compliments and praise, and above all, and better than any of them, a hint of affection. Compliments are well, praise is well, but affection, true affection, is the last greatest gift I think any man can earn by achievement or character. I'm very grateful for that reward. Many a year ago, I gathered an incident from Dana's 2 Years Before the Mast popular book. Went something like this. There was a self-important little skipper of a coasting sloop engaged in the dried apple and furniture trade. He was always hailing every ship that came in sight. He did it just to air his small grandeur and to hear himself talk. Well, one day, a majestic Indiaman came plowing by with course on course of canvas, towering into the sky, her decks and yards swarming with sailors, her hull burdened to the plimsoll line with a rich freightage of exotic spices, lading the breezes with mysterious and wonderful odors of the Orient. It was a noble spectacle. Well, of course, that little captain popped into the shrouds and squeaked out a hail, "Ship ahoy! What ship is that? And whence and whither?" The answer came back in a deep and thunderous bass over the speaking trumpet. "The Begum of Bengal, 142 days out of Canton, homeward bound. What ship is that?" That just crushed our poor little creature's vanity flat. And he squeaked out most humbly, "Only the Marianne, 14 hours out of Boston, headed for Kittery Point with nothing in particular." How eloquent that "only" to express the depths of his humbleness. Well, that's just my case. In 1 hour out of every 23, no more, I stop and I pause and I reflect in the stillness of the night. And then I am humbled and I am properly meek. And during those times, I'm only the Marianne, 14 hours out, cargoed with vegetables and tinware. But in all the other 23, my vain self-complacency rides high on the white crest of approval, and then I am a stately Indianman, plowing the great seas under a cloud of canvas and laden with the most precious cargo in words that ever been vouchsafed to any wandering alien on this planet, I think. And then I am the Begum of Bengal, 70 years out, homeward bound. Thank you, and good night.